Ambassador Elena Chen's sleep pod chirped with an urgent priority alert at 3 a.m. Earth Standard Time. She blinked awake instantly, years of diplomatic crisis having trained her body to bypass grogginess. The neural interface beside her bed projected the message directly into her field of vision. The Galactic Council demanded her immediate presence at Nexus Station. "Computer, details," she commanded, already sliding out of bed. Her AI assistant Araya responded in a measured tone. "Human Research Outpost Vanguard 7, near the Viridian Expanse, has been destroyed. All 42 researchers are presumed dead. The Council has classified it as a regrettable incident and called for emergency peace talks." Elena's jaw tightened. Earth Command's assessment. Classified as a deliberate attack. Preliminary analysis indicates weapons signatures consistent with Kethnar phase cannons. So there it was. What the Council termed a regrettable incident, Earth Command called an act of war. Elena moved to her wardrobe, selecting the formal diplomatic uniform that had become humanity's recognized symbol in interstellar relations. The deep blue fabric with silver trim, colors chosen to reflect Earth's oceans and clouds when seen from space, felt heavier than usual on her shoulders. Within the hour, Elena's diplomatic vessel Olive Branch detached from Earth Orbital Diplomatic Court headquarters, its sleek form accelerating toward the nearest jump point. The irony of the ship's name wasn't lost on her as she watched Commander Jackson Wells coordinate with the military escort vessels flanking them. 2 Terran Defense Force destroyers officially classified as diplomatic security to avoid violating Council protocols limiting human military deployments. "The Council's expecting the usual song and dance," Wells said, joining her on the observation deck. The veteran military officer had served as tactical advisor to 3 ambassadors before her. His weathered face betrayed the cynicism that came with watching humans be systematically marginalized in galactic politics for decades. "We arrive, they express their profound regrets, offer token compensation, and we all pretend justice has been served." Elena nodded toward the secure tablet in her hand. "I've been reviewing the victim profiles." Dr. Mayako Seto was about to publish a paper on nonlinear quantum tunneling. Marcus Okafor had 3 children back on Mars colony. Dr. Singh was celebrating his 70th birthday next month. She set the tablet down. "I'm not interested in token compensation." Wells glanced around to ensure they were alone before speaking. "You've received the Phoenix Initiative protocols." "I have," Elena confirmed, her voice dropping. For decades, Earth Command had prepared contingency plans for a diplomatic break with the Council, knowing that someday the condescension might turn deadly. That day had arrived. "They're expecting us to bow and scrape like always," Wells said, unconsciously checking his sidearm, a gesture technically prohibited in diplomatic missions. Elena didn't object. Then they're about to learn something about humanity they should have figured out long ago. She closed the victim files and opened Earth Command's tightly encrypted contingency protocols. "We've tolerated their patronizing attitude because we believed peaceful cooperation, even on unequal terms, was better than conflict. But some lines can't be crossed." As the Olive Branch accelerated toward the jump point that would take them to Nexus Station, Elena mentally prepared for what might be humanity's most consequential diplomatic mission since first contact. In the ship's memorial garden, she placed her hand against the wall bearing the names of every human diplomat who had died in service. "This time," she whispered, "we negotiate as equals, or not at all." The Council chamber gleamed with bioluminescent grandeur as Elena and her team were escorted through massive iridescent doors. The cavernous amphitheater had been designed to inspire awe, or more accurately, to intimidate. Elena noted how the chamber's seating arrangement physically manifested the Council's hierarchy. Ancient species like the Vortal occupied the central dais, while humanity was relegated to the outer ring alongside civilizations that had achieved FTL travel less than a millennium ago. "Quite the pecking order they've established," whispered Dr. Lakshmi Patel, the delegation's xenolinguist. Her neural implants were already working overtime, analyzing the subtle communicative cues from 24 alien species. 200 years in galactic society, and they still seat us next to the Floraxians, who discovered fire last Tuesday, Commander Wells muttered under his breath. Alina's expression remained diplomatically neutral. Remember our purpose, she reminded them quietly as they took their assigned places. The proceedings began with a resonant harmonic tone that vibrated through both air and the specialized fluid channels that accommodated aquatic species. The Vortal Supreme Delegate Tellarian rose from her suspension pool, her translucent tentacles forming elaborate patterns that conveyed both authority and what Alina's neural translator identified as smug condescension. "We convene in sorrow," Tellarian's melodic voice echoed, simultaneously translated into each species' native language. "The loss of the human research outpost Vanguard 7 is a tragedy that touches all civilized beings." Alina watched as holographic displays manifested throughout the chamber, showing the debris field that had once been home to 42 brilliant minds. The Vortal delegate's tentacles shifted to a pattern indicating regretful acceptance. "Our investigation has been thorough and conclusive," Tellarian continued. "A rare spatial anomaly, similar to the Cassiopeian flux disturbance of the 87th galactic era, caused a catastrophic power surge within the station's fusion reactors." Dr. Patel subtly tapped her datapad, sending a private message to Alina's neural feed. Asterisk mistranslation detected. The Vortal term used doesn't translate to thorough, but rather expedient or convenient. Asterisk. Alina acknowledged with the slightest nod before addressing the chamber. "The Council's efficiency is remarkable. Our own investigators have barely begun analyzing the sensor data, yet you've already reached conclusions." A ripple of translator-garbled murmurs spread through the chamber. The Kethnar representative Grathol rose to his full 3-meter height, mandibles clicking with barely restrained irritation. "Perhaps," he chittered, compound eyes gleaming, "the ambassador forgets that Council investigative capabilities are somewhat more advanced than human efforts. Our quantum-entangled probes analyzed the debris field within minutes of the incident." "Interesting," Alina replied evenly. "Especially since our station's final distress call specifically reported weapons fire before communications ceased." Grathol's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Primitive sensors often misinterpret natural phenomena." Again. Laughter rippled through the chamber, multitonal and unsettling to human ears. Alina didn't react visibly, but beneath the table, her fingernails broke the skin of her palms. "The Council proposes a resolution," Tellarian interjected smoothly, her tentacles forming patterns of benevolent authority. "While no fault can be assigned for this natural tragedy, we offer reparations of 50,000 galactic credits per human life lost, and priority consideration for a replacement research permit in a safer region." Alina felt rather than saw Wells stiffen beside her. 50,000 credits, less than the cost of a standard Vortal atmospheric skimmer. The insult was calculated, significant enough to seem generous to uninformed observers, yet insulting to anyone who understood true values in galactic currency. "The Council's generosity overwhelms," Alina replied, the formal diplomatic phrase dripping with unspoken meaning. "Humanity requests a recess to consider this thoughtful offer." As they exited the chamber, Major Darius Okonkwo, their security chief, leaned close. "Ambassador, something's wrong. The Council never concludes investigations this quickly, even for species they actually respect." "I know," Alina replied quietly. "They're hiding something. And we're going to find out what." The human delegation's temporary quarters aboard Nexus Station gleamed with the same ostentatious bioluminescence as the Council chamber. Alina surveyed the space with practiced suspicion, while Major Okonkwo ran a security sweep using equipment that officially didn't exist by Council standards. "Found something?" Alina asked as Okonkwo's scanner emitted a soft pulse. The security chief nodded grimly. 3 surveillance devices, standard Council design. They expect us to find those." He adjusted his scanner. "But there's something else, subtler. Not Council standard." He pointed to an ornamental fixture that resembled a vortal meditation stone. That's using quantum entanglement to transmit. Military grade. Commander Wells frowned. Someone's spying on the spies. Or the Council has surveillance they don't admit to, Alina suggested. She made a subtle hand gesture, and her team activated their personal scramblers, another technology humanity had developed in secret. Dr. Petal looked up from her analysis terminal. Ambassador, I've been reviewing the translation matrices from today's session. They deliberately mistranslated 17 key terms to undermine our position. Examples? Elena asked. When you mentioned treaty rights, it was translated to the Kethnar as requested privileges. When Telerian referred to the investigation, she used their term for cursory examination, while we heard thorough investigation. Alina processed this information with growing certainty that they were navigating a far more treacherous situation than a mere diplomatic dispute. We maintain the appearance of good faith negotiations, she decided. Meanwhile, Commander Wells, activate Phase 1 of Protocol Phoenix. Wells nodded and departed for their ship, where secure communications could be established with Earth Command. Araya, Alina's AI assistant, materialized as a subtle holographic presence visible only to her. I've detected unusual data patterns in the station's quantum network, Araya reported. Council species are communicating on channels they believe are secure. Can you access them? Not directly, but I can track communication flows. There's been a 327% increase in encrypted transmissions between Vortal and Kethnar representatives in the past 6 hours. Their planning was interrupted by the chime announcing the ceremonial recess banquet, an elaborate display of cross-species cuisine that served as both diplomatic ritual and subtle reminder of biological differences between council members. Alina moved through the gathering with practiced ease, accepting bizarre food offerings she couldn't possibly consume and engaging in carefully measured small talk. As she navigated toward the Palexian delegation, potential allies from a relatively young species, a Kethnar diplomat abruptly collided with her, spilling a viscous blue liquid across her uniform. My profound apologies, Ambassador, the young Kethnar chittered, mandibles vibrating with apparent distress. As attendants rushed forward with cleansing solutions, the Kethnar leaned close, appearing to help clean the spill while whispering, "Data chip in your pocket. Trust no one from the elder species." The diplomat, Kaveth according to his identity marker, was quickly escorted away by his superiors, who offered elaborate apologies for the junior diplomat's clumsiness. Hours later, in secure quarters with triple verification privacy protocols engaged, Alina's team examined the quantum-encrypted data chip. Araya bypassed its security, revealing footage that sent ice through Alina's veins. Kethnar and Vortal ships firing upon the human research station. This could be fake, Okonkwo warned. A manipulation to provoke us into a diplomatic misstep. Or the evidence that explains why the Council was so quick to label this a spatial anomaly, Alina countered. Dr. Patel studied the footage with her enhanced perception systems. The quantum signature appears authentic, but we need verification. I should meet this Kiveth again. Alina nodded. Carefully. If this is genuine, we're not participating in peace talks. We're surrounded by the perpetrators of an act of war. As her team dispersed to their assigned tasks, Alina gazed out at the glittering expanse of Nexus Station. The vast diplomatic hub suddenly felt less like a forum for interspecies cooperation and more like what Wells had named it, a serpent's nest. Council sessions intensified over the next 2 days. While projecting diplomatic patience, Alina carefully maneuvered through proposals designed to undermine human autonomy. The most insidious was presented by the Olafy representative, a crystalline being who communicated through synchronized light patterns. Given recent unfortunate events, the Council proposes enhanced security oversight for remaining human outposts, the Olafy's translator conveyed. Such protection would ensure no further anomalies threaten human researchers. Protection. Oversight. The euphemisms for control were transparent to Alina. Meanwhile, Dr. Patel had arranged another clandestine meeting with Kaveth, confirming the authenticity of the attack footage and learning something far more disturbing. The outpost was destroyed because of what it discovered. Elena told her inner circle as they gathered in their quarters communication-proof chamber. According to Kaveth, Vanguard 7 had found an ancient transit gate, technology that would give humanity independent access to regions previously controlled by Council species. Commander Wells, recently returned from the Olive Branch *, nodded grimly. Earth Command confirms that the station's final data burst contained readings consistent with artificial subspace architecture. They didn't know what they'd found, only that it was significant. Kaveth mentioned a shadow coalition called the Galactic Preservation Front. Dr. Patel added, a cross-species group dedicated to maintaining the current power balance. They're responsible for numerous accidents that have befallen emerging species over centuries. Phase 1 of Phoenix Protocol is complete, Wells reported. Fleet deployments have shifted throughout Council space. If necessary, we can secure our colonies without depending on Council protection. Elena nodded. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The following morning, Elena entered the Council chamber with renewed purpose. The session began with the Olifi representative elaborating on their security assistance proposal. Such oversight would naturally require Council observers at all human facilities. The crystalline being's lights flickered. Given your species' developmental challenges, this arrangement benefits all parties. Elena smiled pleasantly. Speaking of development, the Council might be interested in humanity's recent innovation in quantum entanglement communication. Our scientists have achieved instantaneous transmission without decay over distances exceeding 20 light-years. The Olifi's light patterns stuttered momentarily, a reaction Elena had been watching for. Quantum communication at that scale would revolutionize interstellar relations and potentially bypass the Council's carefully controlled communication networks. Most impressive, if verified, the Olifi recovered. The Council would naturally be interested in examining such technology. Naturally, Elena agreed. Just as we're interested in examining the technology that allowed Council ships to bypass our outpost's defense systems. A hush fell over the chamber. Elena had carefully avoided making a direct accusation while planting the first public seed of suspicion. Later, as delegates dispersed for their species-specific rest cycles, Supreme Delegate Talarian intercepted Elena in a garden designed for private conversations, or so the Vortal believed. Your species shows remarkable stubbornness, Ambassador, the ancient being said, her tentacles forming patterns that ARIA translated as both threat and curiosity. 16 species before you accepted reality and proper hierarchy when faced with technological superiors. Elena studied the ancient being whose species had dominated galactic politics for millennia. Perhaps that's why they're now just footnotes in your history archives while we're having this conversation. Talarian's color shifted slightly. You must understand your position in a greater order. The Council has maintained peace for 12,000 years through proper hierarchy. We've studied Earth's history extensively, Elena replied. Vietnam, Afghanistan, the colonial independence wars, conflicts where technological advantage didn't guarantee victory. Primitive skirmishes on a single planet hardly compare to galactic scales. Talarian dismissed, though her tentacles betrayed a pattern of discomfort. The principle remains the same, Elena said quietly. Humanity's most defining characteristic isn't our technology, Talarian. It's simpler than that. We don't know when we're beaten, which means, practically speaking, we rarely are. While the public sessions maintained their diplomatic theater, Dr. Patel achieved what many considered impossible. With ARIA's processing power and access codes provided by Kaveth, she cracked a section of the Council's quantum-encrypted archive. It's worse than we thought, she reported, her voice tight as the human team gathered around the holographic display in their secure chamber. The outpost attack wasn't an isolated incident. The evidence unfurled before them. Records of systematic interference with human development spanning generations. colony ships that experienced navigation errors, research stations that suffered containment failures, trade agreements mysteriously renegotiated at the last moment to humanity's disadvantage. This goes beyond the preservation front, Commander Wells said grimly. This is official council policy. Belina studied the documents with growing cold fury. There's a reference here to something called the Thessalonian scenario. Area. Context. The AI's voice was measured, cross-referencing council historical archives. The Thessalonians appear to have been a species that advanced rapidly approximately 3,700 years ago. They discovered multiple technologies independently rather than through council guidance, including an efficient form of FTL travel. What happened to them? Elena asked, though she suspected the answer. They disappear from records after challenging council authority. No further mentions in any accessible database. Silence fell over the human delegation as the implications sank in. They're afraid of us, Major Okonkwo said finally. Not of what we are now, but of what we might become. Belina made her decision. It's time to play our hand. We do this publicly, where it can't be buried in committee reports or mistranslated into obscurity. The following day, as the full council convened for what was supposed to be a session on reparation details, Elena watched the council representatives enter with their usual hierarchical ceremony. When the moment came for her to formally accept or reject their latest inadequate proposal, she instead nodded subtly to Araya. The chamber's sophisticated holographic systems, designed to display evidence during deliberations, suddenly activated without authorization. The attack on the human outpost played on every display surface, followed by intercepted communications between Preservation Front members discussing the need to contain the human problem before they discovered more ancient technology. Chaos erupted. Species representatives shouted over one another, translation systems struggling to keep pace with the cacophony of protests, denials, and shocked exclamations. This is fabricated. Grath Ul of the Kethnar thundered, mandibles clicking furiously. A desperate human ploy. The evidence speaks for itself, Elena replied calmly, her voice carrying through the chamber as RIA ensured perfect translation to every species present. But it's merely the tip of a much larger conspiracy. The next set of recordings appeared. Documentation of deliberate interference with human colonies and research, spanning decades. Most stunning was footage of a council inner chamber meeting where Tellarian herself discussed the need to guide humans along a path of limited development. Several of the younger species representatives stood, physically separating themselves from the elder council members. The Nithar delegation, silicon-based entities known for neutrality, tilted their crystalline forms toward Elena in what their species considered a gesture of respect. For centuries, Elena continued as the chamber quieted. We've offered friendship and received condescension. We've shared our art, music, and literature while being classified as barely sentient. We've abided by rules designed to limit us while believing, perhaps naively, that justice would eventually prevail. She gazed around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of worlds. Today proves otherwise. Humanity will no longer participate in a system designed for our containment rather than our cooperation. The silence that followed was profound. Tellarian's tentacles formed patterns of both threat and calculation before she finally spoke. This session will recess for 12 hours, the Vortal announced. The council must deliberate on these serious allegations. The 12-hour recess transformed Nexus Station into a hive of frenetic diplomatic activity. Belena's quarters became the unexpected center of a quiet revolution as representatives from 17 younger species requested private consultations, slipping past their senior delegates to reach the human ambassador. The Nithar have experienced similar accidents when our crystal computing technology advanced too rapidly, the silicon-based delegate confided, their crystalline form vibrating with suppressed emotion. We were told it was an unfortunate coincidence. The Palaxians, aquatic beings whose admission to the council was relatively recent, shared similar stories through their water speech translators. 3 of our deep space research vessels experienced catastrophic life support failures after discovering what may have been ancient technology. Their representative bubbled. We never suspected coordinated action. Elena realized humanity wasn't alone in its frustration, just the first willing to challenge the system openly. The pattern became clear. The oldest species, particularly the Vortal, Kethnar, and Olifi, maintained their dominance not through natural superiority, but through systematic suppression of emerging civilizations. Meanwhile, Commander Wells reported from the secure communication chamber. Phase 2 of Protocol Phoenix is ready for activation on your command, Ambassador. Elena nodded. Be prepared, but hold until I give the signal. This may still resolve without escalation. With 2 hours remaining before the Council reconvened, ARIA alerted Elena to an incoming communication from Tellarian, a private channel request that bypassed normal diplomatic protocols. A surprising honor. Supreme Delegate, Elena said as the Vortal's image materialized in the secure holographic field. These are unusual circumstances, Tellarian replied, her tentacles forming patterns of carefully constructed conciliation. The Council has prepared a revised response to recent revelations. The proposal appeared in Elena's neural feed. Acknowledgement of security failures that may have contributed to the outpost destruction. Increased reparations to 100,000 credits per human life lost, and formation of a joint security task force to investigate the alleged preservation front. It was, Elena recognized immediately, a non-apology wrapped in a control mechanism. The Joint Task Force would effectively place all human outposts under direct Council oversight, exactly what they had wanted from the beginning. Your offer shows why we find ourselves at this impasse. Tellarian, Elena replied. You still believe this is a negotiation where you hold all the leverage. Humanity's position in galactic society is precarious. Tellarian's tentacles formed patterns of warning. Without Council trade routes, technology access, and security guarantees, your colonies would be vulnerable. This is not threat, Ambassador, merely reality. Elena smiled. Perhaps it's time you understood our reality. She authorized the final phase of Protocol Phoenix. Throughout Council space, previously hidden human defense platforms came online. Automated manufacturing facilities buried in asteroid belts activated. Long-dormant sleeper ships awoke in the shadows of gas giants. What is this? Tellarian demanded as alerts flooded her neural network. For decades, we prepared for this eventuality. Elena explained calmly. Those primitive sensors you've mocked detect far more than you realized. Those inefficient human ships carry capabilities you've never observed. We've hidden our true development, Tellarian, not out of fear but strategic necessity. This is impossible. The Vortal's color shifted to a pale blue. Shock in her species' emotional spectrum. None of our systems are positioned to attack, Elena clarified. They're entirely defensive, designed to ensure humanity's survival should the Council ever move against us directly. We've built them in secret while playing the role you expected, the grateful, subservient newcomers. The communication ended with Tellarian visibly shaken. When the Council reconvened, Elena presented her terms with unwavering clarity. Full acknowledgement of the attack, appropriate reparations based on actual value calculations rather than the Council's insulting metrics, prosecution of those responsible, and fundamental reforms to Council structure. You have 24 hours to consider, she concluded, her voice carrying with perfect clarity through the chamber. After that, humanity charts its own course. The Council chamber hummed with tension as Elena and her team entered for the response session. The usual ceremonial entrance music had been dispensed with. The atmosphere was too charged for such pleasantries. Elena noted the altered seating arrangement. Several of the younger species had repositioned their delegations closer to the human section, a subtle but unmistakable statement of alignment. Tellarian rose from her suspension pool, her normally iridescent tentacles muted to a pale gray, a sign of stress rarely seen in the ancient species. The Council has deliberated on the human delegation's unprecedented demands. She began, her melodic voice lacking its usual resonant authority. We offer a revised resolution. The terms appeared simultaneously on every delegation's information display. Alina reviewed them with outward calm while ARIA performed a detailed analysis, highlighting the changes from previous offers. The proposal included increased reparations, 200,000 credits per human life lost, and acknowledged security lapses that led to unauthorized military action against the outpost. It promised an internal review of Council policies regarding emerging species and offered humans 3 seats on a special oversight committee. It was, Alina recognized immediately, cosmetic. The reparations remained insultingly low for the deliberate destruction of a research station and 42 irreplaceable lives. The acknowledgement stopped short of admitting Council responsibility. The internal review would disappear into bureaucratic oblivion. The Oversight Committee seats would give the appearance of influence while ensuring humans remained outvoted. The Preservation Front would continue its work under a different name, with greater secrecy. The fundamental power structure would remain unchanged. Most tellingly, there was no mention of prosecuting those responsible. Helena stood, her expression giving nothing away as she activated her universal translator. The chamber fell silent. Thousands of beings from dozens of worlds waiting for humanity's response. Throughout human history, she began, we have faced moments where we must choose between convenient submission and difficult principle. She paused, making eye contact with delegates from species who had privately expressed support. We choose principle today. Alina's voice remained steady as she continued. Humanity formally withdraws from all negotiations with the current Galactic Council structure. We hereby nullify all treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic arrangements entered into under the false presumption of equal standing. The translator systems nearly overloaded with the explosion of responses, threats, pleas, expressions of shock or dismay, translating into a cacophony of sounds, lights, and electromagnetic pulses. This is diplomatic suicide. Grathol thundered, rising to his full height, mandibles clicking frantically. Alina met his compound eyes without flinching. No, this is diplomatic evolution. She signaled, and the human delegation rose in unison. To the Council's visible shock, representatives from 11 other species stood as well, including the Nithar, Palaxians, and several civilizations whose admission to the Council was recent enough that they hadn't been fully indoctrinated into its hierarchical mindset. Security systems throughout Nexus Station flickered momentarily as ARIA ensured their safe passage. The human delegation moved with practiced precision toward the grand exit doors of the Council chamber. Doors traditionally used only for ceremonial entrances, never for departures during active sessions. You cannot simply walk away from the established order. Telarian called, abandoning diplomatic protocol in her agitation. At the threshold, Alina turned for a final statement. The chamber's automatic translation systems focused on her words, projecting them in perfect clarity to every being present. For too long, we believed the stars call us to become like you. We now understand they call us to remain ourselves, even if that means walking alone. As the delegation crossed the threshold, the galactic news networks, which had been broadcasting the proceedings to trillions of beings across thousands of worlds, captured the historic moment. The first species in 8,000 years to willingly walk away from the Council and survive. 3 months after the historic walkout, the Terran Embassy on Luna hosted representatives from 22 former Council species. The vast observation dome, with Earth hanging blue and luminous in the black sky above, served as the backdrop for what many were already calling a new era in galactic relations. Elena, now serving as Earth's first Galactic Relations Director, studied the assembled delegates with quiet satisfaction. The Stellar Concordat, a new interstellar alliance based on technological sharing and mutual defense, was taking shape under humanity's unexpected leadership. The latest intelligence reports, Director, Commander Wells said, joining her at the viewport. Even in his formal diplomatic attire, he carried himself like the soldier he remained at heart. "Let me guess, the council continues to unravel?" Elena asked. Wells nodded. They've lost nearly a third of their members. Trade routes are in disarray. The Kethnar and Vortal delegations are openly accusing each other of fostering the Preservation Front. There are reports of civil unrest on several Vortal worlds as younger generations question their leadership's decisions. Dr. Patil approached, her expression animated. The technological exchange program is exceeding expectations. The Nithar crystal computing algorithms combined with our quantum processors have already improved efficiency by 300%. And the Palaxian bioadaptive materials are revolutionizing our colony habitats. Elena was about to respond when Aria's voice came through her neural implant. "Director, we have an unscheduled arrival. A Vortal diplomatic vessel is requesting permission to enter Earth space." The room fell silent as Elena relayed this information. No Vortal ship had ever entered Sol system. "Security assessment?" Elena asked. "The vessel is unarmed beyond standard defensive capabilities," Aria reported. "Scans detect only one Vortal life form aboard. The vessel's registry identifies it as Supreme Delegate Talarian's personal transport." Hours later, Elena stood in the observatory overlooking the Earth-Moon Lagrange point, watching as Talarian's shuttle docked with the lunar station. The Vortal emerged alone, her once vibrant coloration subdued, her tentacles forming patterns that Elena's neural translator identified as formal humility, a configuration previously thought impossible for the ancient species. "Director Chen," Talarian greeted, using Elena's new title correctly. "I come not as council representative, but as envoy of the Vortal only." A distinction that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago, Elena observed. Much that was unthinkable has become reality, Talarian acknowledged. The council that stood for 12 millennia has fractured. What you began with your walkout has cascaded beyond anyone's prediction. The Vortal's tentacles formed a new pattern, one Elena's translator couldn't immediately interpret. "We have existed for so long that we forgot how to evolve," Talarian admitted. "The Thessalonians once challenged us as you have, but they were not ready. They asked for counsel but rejected wisdom, ultimately destroying themselves through overreach." She extended a data crystal with her primary appendage, a peace offering of incalculable value. "This contains the complete Thessalonian history, a gesture of good faith." "And what does the Vortal envoy seek from Earth?" Elena asked, accepting the crystal. "Not dominance, not submission. Something we haven't sought in millennia. Partnership." Talarian's color shifted to a deep blue. "You humans did something unprecedented. You didn't seek to overthrow us or replace us. You simply walked away and built something better." Elena gestured to the viewport where Earth glowed against the darkness of space. "This is why we walk our own path, Talarian. On that planet, our ancestors kept walking away from systems that didn't serve them, then building new ones. It's in our DNA." As representatives from former council worlds joined them, Talarian experienced something rare for her ancient species, genuine hope for something new. "Perhaps," she said, forming the Vortal gesture of new beginnings, "we have finally encountered the species that will help us remember how to grow, rather than merely exist."